One of the things we want to do right away with anyone who enters the kingdom is help them quickly reach out to their network of relationships. Because the goal is, when someone comes to the Lord, to help them harvest people from among their own friends, family, neighbors, and coworkers to form a new spiritual community. You see, the default is not adding a new believer to an existing spiritual community, but helping them establish a new spiritual community from among their relational network. And so there are multiple ways we can do this. One is having that list of 100 that they make, and then having them immediately pick 5 people from that list with whom to share their testimony and to share the gospel, and help them immediately begin to harvest from among their relational network. But however we do it, we want to communicate the idea of relational stewardship. And by that, I mean this. Normally, when we think of the kingdom, we think of what could be called a bounded set. And this is good, true, accurate, and helpful. So in that view, this circle would represent the kingdom. These X's inside the circle would represent people who are in the kingdom. The X's outside the circle would represent people outside the kingdom. And that is a fact. There are people in the kingdom and there are people not in the kingdom. And it's good and right to prioritize those who are outside the kingdom. And that's a helpful thing that is a reminder from this bounded set way of thinking. So, for example, this is like the principle of the shepherd leaving the 99 sheep in the fold and going out and seeking the one lost sheep. And Jesus tells us that there's more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who comes to life than through many people who have no need of repentance. So this is a helpful thing to communicate that priority. However, it's helpful if we can supplement that view with the idea of a centered set. In a centered set, represented by this diagram here, whether or not a person is in the kingdom is indicated by whether or not the ray indicated by this arrow is pointing toward Christ or away from Christ. So those are in the set that are pointed toward Christ. They're in the kingdom. And this is helpful because, first of all, we can't always know if someone is in or out. It's not always apparent whether someone is in the kingdom or out. In this sort of a view, it helps us keep in mind that every person is suitable for us to minister to bless, to spur on to love and good works, and so on. And so we can try to help every person that's in our relational network take their next step on their faith journey. In this pattern, if someone's already pointed toward Christ, we can encourage them in their faith. Even if they are more mature than we are, we can do that. You see, none of us has achieved the fullness of the measure of the stature of Christ. None of us loves God with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We all have room to grow. So I need you to encourage me in my faith. You need me to encourage you in your faith. So we might be represented by this ray, and the fact that it has a short tail here indicates that there's limited amount of passion, of love for the Lord. So this needs to be lengthened. And so however long it is, it can always be made longer. So we can encourage other believers in their faith. For someone who is pointed away from Christ, our goal is to turn them so that their allegiance is to Christ, that they understand who he is and what he's done, and the natural and right thing is to worship him and to follow him and to obey him and to love him. So if we have a centered set idea, it's a natural thing for us to constantly be in ministry to everyone within our relational network. And we are stewarding those relationships. This is more helpful for our existing set of relationships than for outsiders. With outsiders, we need to be thinking more in terms of a Matthew 10 or a Luke 10 type of approach, where we're looking for a person of peace to invest in. This is more helpful with our existing relationships. This might be more helpful when dealing with those outside of our regular network of relationships. But together, they help balance one another and give us a framework for thinking about stewarding the relationships that God has given us for his kingdom and for his glory.